call this CAMPO Transportation Policy Board meeting to order. No, I am not as good looking as Cynthia Long. Let's be honest, her hair flows much better than mine right here as well. The chair is at a national conference, and so I get to have y'all for the Christmas holidays, so this will be great over here. Looking around for item number 1, we do have a quorum. And item number 2, public comments. I have a Hugh Butler from Sunfield Community Association Advisory Committee. Hey, Hugh. Right there. We call it the witness seat.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just a reminder that we have that very cool system right there that will let you know when your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, I will hopefully get this done in less than 3 minutes. As a follow-up to my comments at last month's Transportation Policy Board meeting regarding Sunfield and area roadways, I just wanted to add some additional information. Recently, Governor Abbott, Hayes County Commissioner Cohen, and Buda Mayor Urbanowski lauded the success of economic development through tax incentives, securing a major expansion of U.S. Foods in Buda. This multi-million-dollar expansion will increase the footprints of U.S. Foods by approximately 50% and bring roughly 165 new jobs to the area. Congratulations. I mean, that's great news. However, along with this expansion will come additional semi-trailer traffic and employee commuting traffic. I ask that this board, as much as is in your power, to support the need for roadway infrastructure related to growth and economic development. I also ask, as much as is in your power, to hold these entities, the state of Texas, the county of Hayes, the city of Buda, and in this case also the county of Travis, hold them accountable for including roadway planning, funding, and construction when collaborating on economic development which impacts traffic on existing roadways. In this case, a sorely dilapidated Turnersville Road and an unexpanded Main Street in and around Sunfield. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Butler. I still think you had about a minute and a half left, so we appreciate it. Item number 3, executive session. There's no need for that, my standpoint. Item number 4, report from the tech.
I'll do that. Yep, so at our November meeting, we had a discussion and recommendation on the fall amendment cycle, which is going to be on the agenda today as well. Our staff presented information on the amendment cycle and the public outreach efforts, again, which we'll cover during our presentation today. The TAC made a unanimous recommendation to the policy board to approve adoption of the Transportation Improvement Program and Regional Transportation Plan amendments. We also had a presentation by Saba Sevilla who's the Director of Public Works for the City of San Marcos, and he provided an overview of the city's SMTX Go traffic management application, really informing the group on how other agencies can implement similar innovative traveler information systems for really not much money spent on a pretty comprehensive system. That's it.
All right. Anyone have any questions? Bueller? Okay. Thanks, Ben. Item number 5, which is a public hearing and presentation of amendments to the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Plan or Program and the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. This is a public hearing. I'd normally ask our attorney, but apparently our attorneys may have gotten lost on the way here. So is this hearing's also for items 7 and 8? Is that correct?
Just for 8. We did a public hearing last month for item 7.
Okay, so do you want me to also call out item 8 and open that right now for the public hearing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we are also opening item 8, discussion and take appropriate action on out-of-cycle amendments to the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement TIP. How do you not put P right there as well? In the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan, or TP. All right, Ron.
Thank you. So I'll do a quick presentation. I don't know if we've had anybody sign up for the public comments, but so the public hearing is specifically for item 8, which is a quick action option amendment process, which is essentially our spring amendment cycle. We are requesting to accelerate that. We're also, to minimize the confusion, we are concluding the fall amendment cycle, which is a 4-month process where we go out for 30 days of public comment, and is being requested for approval in item 7. So item 8 is the quick action option amendments, and we are requesting to process this through the quick action option process, where we request the board to, through a vote of 75% of the board, to waive the public participation requirements, the 30-day comment period, essentially hold a public hearing and approve those amendments all in the same action and meeting. And the reason for that is so that we have several projects that need to be submitted to the state that have received large federal grants. I'll go through that in the next slide, actually, in the actual amendments. Some of those are on a fairly tight deadline from the federal government, and so the quick action option is there so that we can, the policy board can be responsive to significant projects like this and a lot of federal funding that's involved, and allows us to process these a little faster than normal. And so we have 5 amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program. The I-35 Cap and Stitch project, the City of Austin received a $105 million grant from the Federal Highway Administration, and that is being included in the Transportation Improvement Program. And then they also received another grant for the Barton Springs Bridge replacement. That was a recent grant. I think it's, I believe it was $32 million they received from the Federal Highway Administration. And then TxDOT has the expansion of the SH 130 roadway. They're going to be adding a lane in each direction from I-35 to RM 685. And then we also have Corridor A2 from Williamson County. This is a bond-funded program that is expected to receive federal funding next fiscal year. And in preparation of that, they are seeking functional classification and going through the NEPA process. And so that needs to be included in the TIP as well. We also have 2 projects, amendments to the Regional Transportation Plan. We have the I-10 expansion through Caldwell County. It's a very small piece, but that is something that is going to be moving forward, and they're doing the NEPA process now, and so that needs to be included in the RTPs to receive NEPA clearance next spring. And then finally, we're making some adjustments to RM 2243 so that they can also receive NEPA clearance. And so all of these products, we will, and I'll take it to item 8, I guess, where the recommendation is and obviously I'll open up for any questions y'all may have, but we are recommending that the policy board approve the quick action option process and these associated amendments here.
So Ryan, just to be clear, not only one, do we see a variety of different projects that are pretty essential to various different corridors in the region, but 2, if I'm correct, the funding isn't guaranteed to be there at a later time if this isn't passed today, correct?
That's one of the urgency here, is that to make sure that the funding is obligated. Obviously, there are going to be some changes in the new year, and so I think it is important to move these projects along as quickly as possible and get those obligated so that the region doesn't lose the funding.
Okay, that's a key aspect. All right. Anyone have any questions?
I'll skip it to item 8. It's just a... And so, that's the recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
You sure you don't want us to see any of those other cool slides that came before that?
Oh, yeah, no, I'll bring them back up right after this.
Okay. Just for our purposes, I want to make sure for the record that I announce who has the proxies for who. Commissioner Beckett has a proxy for Judge Oakley. Commissioner Covey has the actually proxy for Chair Long. Councilmember Fuentes has the proxy for Councilmember Ellis. Commissioner Howard has the proxy for Commissioner Trevelyan. Some guy named Rudy Mateer has the proxy for Matt Harris. And Ms. Patillo has the proxy for Judge Brown. Any questions? Oh, wait. I need to... You can... No, come on through. We had to answer all of our own legal questions, so if we got it wrong,
Big
hey,
trouble.
yeah, I'm just saying, okay?
Goodness, the chairman's got it.
Okay, if we don't have any questions, to call for a vote. And I guess what we'd say is that, so we have the public hearing. What, shouldn't we, if we have a public hearing first, though, shouldn't we have to close the public, see who's available
Yeah.
for the public hearing and then close it?
Yeah, I think that was kind of, yeah, let's close the public hearing, and
Okay.
then we'll do item 8 after item 7, and then normal. If
Is
that works.
anyone burning to speak about these amazing projects that, if not passed and funding done, will probably destroy our region? Okay.
Wow.
Okay, I see no one, no comments right there. So I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I think I got a second and a third. Okay. All those in favor of closing public hearing, say aye. All right. Those against? Okay. Motion to approve item 8 as presented?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of item 8, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Item 8 is approved. Okay. All right. Now let's go to the more boring aspect. Item number 6, discussion and take appropriate action on November 4, 2024 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
There we go.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those against? Okay. Now, item number 7, discussion and take appropriate action on amendments to the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Plan and the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. All right.
Thank you. So this is bringing back the fall amendment cycle. So this is the other amendment action that we're requesting today that has gone through the full public involvement process through October and November that Joyce is going to talk about in a minute. But again, these are the major significant changes to the Transportation Improvement Program and Regional Transportation Plan, that need direct approval from the policy board in order to move forward. And so this has gone to TAC, as Chad mentioned, and they recommended approval. And so we're back here today for adoption. And I think it's always a good opportunity to kind of talk about these two functions. And I know I feel like I've gone through this slide a lot, but I think it's always important to bring it up that the Regional Transportation Plan and the TIP together are kind of the bookend regulatory administrative processes that the policy board where they approve projects for federal funding that's funded through any of the programs through USC 23 and USC 49, which is the funding programs for the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transportation Administration, or Transit Administration, all of those programs have to, for projects to move forward with those types of funds, have to have express approval from the policy board in order to move forward. And so they first are listed in the Regional Transportation Plan, which sets them up for environmental clearance through the NEPA process. It also allows them to be eligible for those federal funding programs. Once they are selected for a specific federal funding program or for a specific amount of funding, that's when it's submitted for the Transportation Improvement Program. And so that has to be listed. The TIP is the administrative record of the board's approval for that funding to move forward. And so without that approval, funding cannot be obligated to a specific project. And so that's why it's a critical thing that we amend on a regular basis. Obviously, there's a lot of funding that we, as a policy board, select directly, but also federal funding that's selected by the state through TxDOT's programs, as well as any of the discretionary grant programs that come out of Washington, D.C. Have to come to this body for approval. And so the actual amendments, I went through them last time, and I can go through them briefly, but we have a few, and if you have any specific questions, happy to do that. It'll probably take a while to go through all of these. But we have some new projects that receive discretionary grant funding from Washington, D.C. These are projects through the NEVI program. We have some that the PROTECT program and RAISE grants as well. And then we've got some significant changes to some projects. The addition of FM 812. This is a new project that's being funded by TxDOT, as well as the expansion of the HERO program. We're adding some additional funding to continue that program as well. We also have a few projects, RM 2243 and SH 71 that are being moved outside of the tip window. And then in addition to that, the SH 130 concession company in Caldwell County received a grant for a truck plaza along SH 130. And then we have 3 plan amendments which are in the green there, and these are changes to SH 29, FM 971, and then the addition of 183A where they're going to be adding a lane on that toll road. This is the RMA project. And again, yeah, if you have any specific questions about those projects, please let me know. And then I'm going to hand it over to Doyce to talk about what we heard during the community outreach process. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. So the public comment period opened October 7th. We actually ended up keeping it open a little bit further past that November 8th date. Some of the public events that we had were the weekend of Veterans Day, and so we kept it open, but the TAC still had the benefit of the public comments that we received. So the TAC got that public comment summary prior to their recommendation last month. So just as a recap from last month, we held several in-person events throughout the region, including at the policy board meeting in November when y'all had that public hearing. We accepted comments by mail, through email. The online open house was open the duration of the comment period in addition to those in-person opportunities. And then we've continued to have the practices of both sending information and comment cards by mail, postage paid envelopes to return them, and also receiving comments through voicemail. So we received 6 public comments for this amendment cycle. We had comments about wanting additional improvements for bike and ped, some additional traffic reduction implementation, concerns about safety and lighting around some of the highway networks, and also a specific concern about the type of electric vehicle chargers. So that summarizes the types of comments, and the community outreach summary along with the full length of the comments that we received are in your backup material.
All right, thank you, Doyce. So that concludes the presentation. We'll take questions, and staff and the recommendation, staff and TAC recommend the policy board adopt the amendments to the TIP and plan as detailed in resolution 2024-12-7. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Doyce. Yeah, I think it's another important aspect is to say that actually the TAC approved this too as well. Any questions, y'all? Yes, Mayor.
I'm so sorry if I missed this. How do some of these projects end up being removed?
So typically, if there's a schedule change, I know in the case of SH 71, and I'll let Tucker answer this if he wants to, but that the schedule's been delayed, and so it's moving outside of the TIP window. It's in fiscal year 29, I believe, or 30 now. So it's still moving forward, but it's not in the 4-year TIP window from 2025 to 2028. And in some cases in the past, I know a project has been defunded for one reason or another. That can happen. And at that point, we remove it from the plan or the TIP. So.
Thank you. I didn't see anything in the backup that explained what was happening on those. I was wondering where I could get more information.
I can get with the sponsors. I don't know, Tucker, if you want to talk about SH 71. And I think 2243.
That's the one I'm looking at.
What's that?
That's the one I'm looking at.
2243.
Yeah.
I think that one, I'd have to get with Williamson County on that one. But I believe they moved the construction funding from one part of the project, because this is a multi-phase project.
Right.
They moved the construction funding from one piece to a different one that's not in the TIP currently. So,
Okay.
And it's all locally funded. So.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Tucker, would you like to add anything?
He got it right.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Boy, this meeting's moving on quickly. I guess they told me no other questions. All right. All those in favor of approving items 7 as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Okay.
Thank
Passes. All right, that drops us down to item number 9, update on the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan.
Thank you. Will Liska, Regional Planning Manager for CAMPO. This item serves as information on update on the development of CAMPO's 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. Previous updates to the board, that should say board, TPB, have included a discussion of the purpose and timeline of the plan, a discussion of the project call process, and a summary of projects received through that process. That process occurred during this past summer, as well as a review of our revenue estimation methodology for our fiscal constraint analysis. Today's update is focused on the draft results of our revenue estimation for fiscal constraint, and for this presentation I'll be turning things over to Allison Flewitt with Kimley Horn, a consultant who's part of our team for assisting with the RTP.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, members of the board. So today, as Will said, we do want to recap the process that we have taken to arrive at this fiscal limit, and then just give you a little bit of perspective on how that fits in with our fiscal constraint development as a whole. So as many of you all are aware, we have undertaken a project call process. This is where we solicit projects from all of the member jurisdictions and agencies in the region, and we have received applications resulting from that project call. And based on those applications, we've taken those and scored those projects using the MPO's project prioritization criteria. And that has allowed us to arrive at a prioritized project list. When we think about those prioritized projects, all of those have a corresponding project cost. So now we need to think about the other side of that coin, which is our forecasted revenues, which is what we're going to be talking about in more detail today. Once we think about our available revenues that are able to be dedicated to those projects, we're then able to match up available revenues with applicable projects. That ultimately results in our fiscal constraint determination. When we're comparing those revenues to those needs, we end up with two categories of projects. We have our constrained projects, which are those projects which we believe are going to be able to receive funding within the 2050 horizon year of our plan, and then illustrative projects, which are those projects that will remain in the plan, but will not be shown as receiving funding within the horizon year of the plan. So I mentioned the revenue forecasting process, and do want to add just a little bit more context to this. Obviously, the most important attribute of what we're doing when we move toward our fiscal limit and this revenue forecasting process is to enable the determination of our fiscal constraint. This is one of the key federal requirements of the regional transportation planning process, and as you all just heard in your prior presentations, this is kind of that key step that allows us to have that project list that ultimately you use in tandem with your TIP to move projects forward within the region. Something that's really important to note in terms of how this is going to be represented within the RTP is that we do review our revenues and the resulting projects that come out of this fiscal constraint as a regional constraint. So we're not going to be necessarily reporting this out on an individual jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. That being said, we've had a lot of correspondence and conversations with those individual jurisdictions to be sure that we're using the best possible assumptions and information to inform all of those different components as well.
So just to better understand that is that even though this is seen as a holistic restraint for us, those individual entities that are involved with these questions and these issues have been made aware of, have been participated in the process, and are cognizant of the rationale as to why something was or was not restrained in the actual fiscal note.
That's exactly right. And just to kind of take that one step further, we're fully aware, let's say when we look at some of our local revenue that is available, that we can't use Williamson County revenue in Travis County. And so that's something that is baked into this planning process, though we may not be parsing out some of those individual details in the outward-facing kind of reporting of this. All right, so as we get into some of the details of our revenue forecasting, we do want to break this out into just a few categories because each one used a slightly different methodology and a different process to arrive at some of what we'll be showing you today. So we'll talk through our federal and state revenue development, our transit revenues, what we're seeing from our tolling agencies, and then finally, how we approach local revenue development as well. So first, we'll begin with our federal and state revenues. And something that I wanted to highlight here is that the methodology that we're using for the 2050 plan is slightly different than what was used for the 2045 plan. There are a lot of different ways to approach this. In the 2045 plan, a tool called Trends, which is something that is used by, developed by TTI, was used as one of the ways to help get at our federal and state revenues. Now this time around, what we did was we wanted to pull, starting out, our information from the 2025 to 2028 TIP. So essentially what you all just saw on screen and took action on is something that we have been able to pull forward. And in fact, I will note that in your informational paper, the numbers that we're going to show today on screen are actually slightly different even than what you have in that paper, because we have since updated our information to be in concert with the information that you just updated or took action on today. So we do have the most recent TIP amendments incorporated into the numbers that we're now using. So we start with the information in the 2025 to 2028 TIP, but then we want to think about where do we go from there. And to do that, we want to take a little bit of a conservative approach and look at historic revenue levels, not from this current federal transportation legislation cycle, but from our previous transportation legislative cycle, so the FAST Act legislation. So that just helps us get a sense of what historic funding levels have been, and we kind of looked at that in those years of the TIP of during the FAST Act, what were we seeing within this region? And that allows us to set a baseline that we're then able to project forward into the remaining years using that average allocation. I'll note that this is actually consistent with the methodology that's being used right now by TxDOT for their annual revenue forecasting and has been approved by the Commission as well. So we felt like that was something that we felt pretty solid about. And then finally, we did apply a 2% revenue inflation value and forecast that out through 2050. Something that's important to note is that the inflation value that we are considering here for revenues is a little bit different than what we consider for our costs. We do anticipate that our costs are going to grow at a level that outpaces our revenues in terms of their inflation. And so we're seeing a 2% revenue inflation value. That's pretty consistent with what we see as best practice across the country. Keep in mind that although we have had some higher inflation levels in recent years, this is a 25-year plan, so we want to kind of keep that perspective in mind. So now looking out across the totality of our federal and state revenues, it's particularly focusing in on those that are capital focused and able to be allocated to specific projects. We're looking at a total estimated revenue level of $19.6 billion. And this is inclusive of those projects that you all just considered within your 2025 to 2028 TIP. So I do just want to note that they are a part of that revenue level that you're seeing there. And that includes all of the TxDOT funding categories that are able to be applied for those capital type funding sources. So now moving on to transit. We wanted to first begin by having conversations with all of our transit providers across the region. So we did have that opportunity to talk with Cap Metro, ATP, and CARTS and understand how they are forecasting revenues and what they see as kind of those current revenue availabilities within their different agencies. We then need to report this in terms of both capital and operations and maintenance. Obviously, a big distinction between those two things for our agencies. You will note ATP does not show an operations and maintenance number. This is simply because their charge as an entity is not focused on operations and maintenance. When their facilities are capitalized, I guess, they actually move into other agencies for their operations and maintenance. So anything that has a capital cost assigned to it in ATP would ultimately be operated and maintained through another entity. Something Something that I think is probably the most important takeaway for these numbers, because they can look big on first glance, is that these numbers are anticipated to be fully expended over the life of the RTP. So there are already plans, ongoing services that would anticipate to fully account for the dollar values that are being shown here. Now moving on to our regional tolling agencies, CTRMA and SH130, we did have the opportunity to speak with them as well as our TxDOT district office, just to learn a little bit more about the tolling authorities and how they anticipate reflecting their projects within the regional transportation plan. And something that I think is the key takeaway that we had from those discussions is that for projects that are anticipated to come through the RTP, of which some have been identified, we essentially expect to treat those as somewhat of a closed system. So in other words, if a project is being identified, the tolling authorities anticipate that they will fully fund that project through their ongoing operations. Now, there may be opportunities, such as you saw in the TIP that was just adopted today, where outside grants or other things may be funded, and if that is the case, that would be taken as an action at a later time. And finally, moving into our local revenues. Our forecasting methodology, of course, began here as well with conversations with local staff. We wanted to speak with everybody at the county and jurisdictional levels to understand what they had done in terms of forecasting revenues, looking at historic revenue levels, and then understanding the documents that we should be referring to kind of help us get some of those perspectives as well. Some of those things do include capital improvement plans, looking at bond programs, annual budgets. All of those things kind of help us get a baseline of what we think the estimated revenues are going to be across our jurisdictions. That ultimately translated to an estimated overall revenue for our local jurisdictions of $20.5 billion. And just again, a little bit more information about this number. This money could be used for 100% locally funded projects, and also to have the local contribution portion for any federal and state funded projects. So all of that would come out of what we're seeing in that total number. So when we look at this across all of the different funding sources that we were just talking about, our fiscal capacity, we're looking at $59.8 billion roughly for the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. This is an increase when compared to the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. We see that for a couple of reasons. There has been an increase at the federal and state funding level, as we saw even today, some discretionary funding opportunities, some near-term increases in what we're seeing coming through the TIP right now. And then locally, we do continue to expect to see some increase in our bonding capacity across several of our jurisdictions as population levels continue to increase.
All right. Thank you, Allison. I'm going to wrap things up in this presentation with a discussion of next steps, the timeline for the development of the 2050 RTP. So the first round of public outreach has come to a close as of last week. Right now, we are working on taking the information developed through the fiscal constraint analysis and matching funds to projects that have been submitted to us through the project call process. Just 2 weeks ago, we sent draft lists of projects that we projects that are either federally or state, or constrained with either federal or state money, to sponsors that submitted projects for the project call, and those lists are currently under review. We are expecting feedback from agency staff sometime this week, and that information will all feed into the development of the draft 2050 RTP. So that draft 2050 plan is expected to be distributed in mid-January ahead of the first TAC meeting in which we will discuss the draft plan. So information at January 2025 TAC, followed by information that should say TPB information for February 2025 on the draft plan. Following that, we will open up a second round of public outreach for folks to comment on the draft plan, including the draft project lists for the constrained and illustrative projects. Following that, we will take the final plan with revisions from comments from the public and others to TAC and board in March and April. Next in April of 2025, we'll take it to TAC for recommendation, and finally, with that recommendation from TAC to the board for action in May 2025. With that, I'm happy to open things up for questions.
Okay, y'all, it's a lot of information, but honestly, it's informative, and I think from a public standpoint, oftentimes we get questions about, okay, dude, how did y'all actually come to this number? How did the process go? I got to give staff and our wonderful contractors credit for reaching out, talking to entities, getting the information out from there as well, and allowing for us in our different offices to actually participate, improve, and work from that as well. I like that draft outline being right there because someone's going to complain at some point saying, hey, when are you actually going to talk about this thing, when it's going to get approved? So, and you actually have those second round of public outreach meetings, which I think will be really important and informative too. So, anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was curious as to if this methodology was any different than prior ones?
Great question.
Or this is how it's always done?
Yes, the one notable change this time around was in our federal and state revenue projections. And again, I think the biggest difference was in past cycles, or at least the most immediate cycle, we did look at, or CAMPO looked at the trends model as kind of the starting point for some of the funding categories for TxDOT funding. We did actually do a comparison this time around of the trends funding in comparison to the proposed methodology that we had here, which again aligns with what TxDOT is currently doing for their own revenue projections. And we found that it was significantly lower in its revenue projections than our proposed methodology. After that review, we felt more comfortable with the methodology that we ultimately elected to proceed with. But that was the most significant change that was undertaken this round.
Okay. It seems like just like this last 4 years, 5 years was unique with the infrastructure bill and the money coming to the state. The next 4 years could also be different with maybe a lot less money coming. I don't know, but it's interesting.
Great question and great observation. Anyone else with any other questions?
Rudy?
Yes, ma'am.
When we did this for 2045, we had a subcommittee of the board that was involved. Has there been a group of the board that has been involved in this process?
Brian, have we had a group in particular? I forgot this Williams question.
No, we've been presenting each step to the full board.
So, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I'm hearing from you is saying that this time around you felt like it was more important to include the entire board than a subcommittee to make sure you get input information as the process went along.
That's correct.
Okay.
That also means, though, there's not a dedicated group of folks having conversations about how we're being strategic with this plan. One of the things that I recall that came out of our last conversation was, and this is my memory, and this is not going to be the only source for this, but we did, really try to accelerate having projects ready so that when funding was available, that we would be able to fund them, which has served us well, I think, as a region. And that was one of the conversations that came out of that subgroup. And while I'm not going to be on the board, this is my last meeting, but I would just suggest that you might want to think about whether there's some value in having some dedicated time among a subgroup, or at least the executive board, on discussing this and seeing whether there's any elements of this where we ought to be strategic as a region, rather than simply leaving it to staff to lay out the process. It's complicated and it's a difficult thing, but it is also one of the tools that we have to be strategic for the region.
No, I think you bring up a really good point about best practices or information or honestly input that wouldn't have been put otherwise in this, and that opportunity. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm guessing from the last iteration that we had that Councilmember Alter brought up, there were some information and practices, some ideas and concepts that were proffered and that were included in this process along the lines too. Is that right?
That's correct. We've been presenting on the process of development of the plan, the project call process, and the evaluation criteria that we use for the project call, as well as the fiscal constraint elements of the plan. And each step along the way, we're very open to any sort of feedback on how we can, where we steer the process.
I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add, just specifically, we did sort of a review of, how did the last one go? What could we change? And one critique we heard repeatedly last time was the speed it was going. We're not having time to, feel like this is going a little too fast. We moved everything forward or added about 6 months to the process. So you're seeing all these things much sooner than last time. There's more time to provide input, providing all of the information up here in terms of when is this process happening. All of that was taken from that process, as well as having our consultant help us with the local funding element, especially, was a big part. It was very difficult to explain that one last time, and so we tried to have a more straightforward process there.
So I think these are great additions, and I don't know that what you're doing, that I have a criticism of what you're doing, but I think that the board is missing an opportunity to be strategic by not having some dedicated conversations about the strategy underlying the plan. And, we've had challenges as a board really focusing on, the region and what the region needs, and we are supposed to be a planning organization, and this is a key opportunity to do that. And I think some of the muscles that we had doing that before we had the I-35 project that took a lot of the project evaluation and those decisions off the table has meant that we're not having the same kinds of conversations we were having before I-35 about how you prioritize the projects. And I think it's valuable for this body to pursue that, and we will be entering a period where there is more funding as we move beyond refunding all of the projects that were displaced. And so I just think it's an opportunity to be thinking strategically, and and you will get to May and you'll be reviewing it and you won't have had that opportunity. And so I just wanted to flag that is, since Commissioner Howard asked about the differences in the process, that's a significant difference in how we're approaching it.
I think to your point, I was at the Aero Central Texas Catalyst Summit this morning, and they had a quote from an anonymous elected official who essentially said that the job has gotten harder because of the fact that there are day-to-day functions that we have, but we also have to manage the rapid growth and development that's happening in the region. And obviously when projects like I-35 and everything else came around with the growth, that took a lot of the oxygen out of the room from right there as well. I think it's a fair assumption, a fair analysis to say, hey, listen, okay, now that we can take a breath, for a better lack of terms, possibly look and see, either executive team or other group to see about, hey, listen, are there other things that want to input on? Let's see what this works for. What's great is about this staff has done a tremendous job when we haven't been able to catch our breath, and also whenever things are, slower than, like they are right now, to actually speaking to us, answering questions, and being really responsive to these things. I think it would be a great idea for, to, look at further. I'll talk to the chair about seeing what opportunities we have to go ahead and have a group, even if it's exec session, to actually have a conversation about these things. So, great point.
Well, I'll just say that I think once we get the draft, there's going to be tons of input.
Are you trying to say that we're
Just
we're not
historically speaking, that's all I'm saying.
We're not a quiet group? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think there's going to be a lot of input. That's all I'm saying.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, William. Okay, this brings item 10, Executive Director's Report on Transportation Planning Activities.
Oh, yeah, I just had a quick reminder. As you know, we've had the project call out for the carbon reduction and transportation alternative set aside program. Just a quick reminder that the due date for applications is next Friday, not
Brian,
this Friday.
can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I've been here long enough that whenever we get these near Christmas due dates, oh my goodness, people lose their minds. Okay, so please, please, please talk to your staff, remind them of that. If there's anything that needs the discussion with CAMPO staff on that, please do so. I'd rather not have that discussion in February, as happened historically. I know it's the holidays. I know we all have a lot going on, but that's the deadline. So if there's anything that needs to be done or otherwise, or I've seen staff be very flexible on things rather as well, but I'd rather not during the holiday, again, have a call back to, well, this happened around Christmas time, the holidays, this is why we didn't respond.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I mean. We try to get the due date in right before Christmas so I can actually relax during Christmas. And we've got a webinar, actually, kind of a final webinar tomorrow. I've done office hours throughout this whole process and have a dedicated email for this. And I've been getting questions almost every single day, so I know people are working really hard on their applications. So I just wanted to remind everyone, again, that this is due next week. And I also think it's important, another question I always get asked, and I think it's probably good to bring up, is that we have another call coming up after we conclude this one. So this one's going to wrap up hopefully in June of next year with an approval by the policy board on those projects. And then we're going to kick off the Surface Transportation Block Grant funding call, which we use the exact same process, materials, and applications. So we're going to leave all this stuff up online, but it's probably a good idea for y'all to consider what you want to submit for that project call. We're looking at close to $300 million for that one. So quite a bit larger, and it's our flexible more flexible pot of funding that you can spend on a great many things. But I would start considering and building your application now so that when we open that call up that you are ready to get going on that. So, because it is a pretty intensive process, I guess I would say. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Any questions, y'all? Before Christmas. Okay. All right, item number 11, announcements, and I'm going to take them out of order, point of personal privilege on here. So next Technical Advisory Committee meeting will be January 27th, 2025. It still sounds weird, but at that point, the Longhorns will be national champions, so that's okay, at 2 p.m. Next Transportation and Policy Board meeting will be January 13th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Regarding announcements from the Vice Chair. So, y'all have already heard, to me, this is pretty impactful, but this is going to be Councilmember Allison Alter's last meeting. I've known Allison for a long time now, well over a decade. Every time anyone asks me to describe Allison, I choose my words, and what I truly say is thoughtful. Say what you will about opinions, viewpoints, ideas, or concepts. Everything that Allison comes to, whatever she does, is in a thoughtful process, a caring process, a process with an opportunity to try to make something better than what it is. There are few people I know who are attentive enough to details to take the time to ascertain what's the real issues that are going on from there that I've seen in my life. More importantly, few elected officials who actually take the time and the details and analysis and understand the broad-based responsibility that comes with that. Y'all, we know how it is. This job is not easy. So we get lots of slings and arrows at us on a regular basis on this, and what we do, how we do about it, and how we can do better. But what's also really cool about this job is that we really do get to make a demonstrable difference in the communities that we serve. We get to go back and look and say, okay, I was a part of that. I made a difference. That was cool. And we understand the importance of collaboration and leadership. And Allison personifies that. And it is kind of weird. I'm not going to lie to you. For you not to go ahead and, see you here or see other events or anything else from there. You're not going anywhere because Lord knows you cannot not go anywhere, from that. But I wanted to make sure I said how much I appreciate you, care for you, and absolutely love what you've done and made a difference. You have made your city, our region, this state better by being who you are. And that's something you should be very proud of.
Speech.
Yep. Now, what would you like to say?
That's going to be tough to follow. Thank you, Rudy. I have known you over a decade now, and I feel like we've been following each other around since our Leadership Boston class. So thank you for your kind words. It's been a privilege to serve. It's been a privilege to serve on CAMPO for the last 8 years, and I sincerely wish you luck as you navigate the next set of decisions and really challenge you to think bigger and more strategically about what we can do as a region and how we do that together and how we work together. Please take advantage of getting to know each other and building those relationships because they do matter. They help us get things done. And each of us has both an opportunity and a responsibility to make a difference. And I hope that each of us will do that. I'm not going anywhere. Taking a creative pause and figuring out how I want to serve. I suspect you'll see me again, but in different ways. But I'm open to coffees and lunches as I figure out that path after I get some much deserved rest and relaxation. But thank you. It's been a great opportunity to work and serve with all of you.
Well, that's great. And I want to reiterate a point that you just said at the end too. Getting to know one another and the relationships that we build. I mean, you guys know I'm big on that, and it's because it's true. It really does make a difference. When you're on boards like this, you get to know each other on a completely different level than you would otherwise. And for us to be able to have these conversations, get to know each other, to know what's going on with each other's families, work, everything else, makes a big difference. And here's what's really cool. It's the holiday season. There's a lot to do and a lot of things happening in each other's different areas around the region. Take time, if you can, to go ahead and go out somewhere. I know Ballet Freak will be doing the Nutcracker, as they always do. I know I'll be going to Main Street, Bethlehem, out in Burnett County. This is to go from there. I know that we'll be going to Bastrop soon enough to go ahead and go to the Opera House. There's areas across the region that you can go ahead and participate. And what's really cool about this board is that if you reach out to someone there, dude, they're going to want to personally go with you. They will. And that's really awesome. But relationships do matter, and the collaboration do matter. So one of the coolest things that I've seen, and it just keeps showing over and over again, is that we weren't always this way. We were not always this way, the level of collaboration and cohesiveness that we've had. And it's really awesome to see all the big, amazing things we've been getting together because of who we are and what we do together right there as well. So I thank y'all for who you are. I hope each and every one of you have a blessed and wonderful holiday season. And hook 'em.
Adjourned.
Oh,
I think that's what it
I
meant.
think, yeah. Adjourned.